All right. Welcome to Paradigm Shift TV 314. This is your brother, D.M.G the poet, aka Brother Pianki. And we got another great show for you with another powerful guest. Before we get into our spiel, let me do my usual greeting. Let me say hotep. To my Kemetic brothers and sisters, let me say God bless. To my Christian brothers and sisters, let me say Islam. To my Moorish brothers and sisters, let me say Assalamu alaikum. To my brothers and sisters in the NOI, let me say peace. To the brothers and sisters in the nation of gods and earth, them 5%ers. Let me say what's up to my atheist brothers and sisters. Salute to my Aboriginal brothers and sisters. And last but not least, let me say Jumbo to the rest of my brothers and sisters throughout the African diaspora, be it here in the wilderness of the United States of America or beyond. Y'all know I say that greeting for one reason and one reason only. It's because if you black, I'm with you. And I hope that you with me. Our different ideologies should not keep us from uniting. And we can have unity without uniformity. And we can disagree without being disrespectfully disagreeable. With that being said, my brother, please reintroduce yourself to the Paradigm Shift TV 314 audience.
Sure. Hey, Brother Pianki, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah, everybody, my name is Robert Ash, and I am a minister. I'm a pastor of a church, one of the pastors there, and have been in actually serving in two churches now, but basically it's Euphrates Baptist Church. And so and so I've been in as a Christian for a while. My basic function and focus really has been apologetics, which is, defending the faith and being able to articulate what the Christian faith means, and doing so without being beholden to any political platform or party, because the teachings of the Bible are beyond any kind of political party, and that's just and beyond any one denomination that it's Christian or claims to be. So that's really where my focus is. I have a channel on YouTube. It's called The Thinker's Bible, and it's focused on helping people understand that people can be thinking people and also believe in the Bible, and then also that the Bible is not beholden to any political platform or party, and then that's really the whole focus, of what I do. And so been there about 6 months, been in ministry many years, and have, background in science and theology and, business and life, and see Christianity as being applicable to any nation of people, including black people, including brown people, including white people. And, Jesus has his arms open for everyone. He died for everybody, rose from the dead for everybody. And it's not, and he's not beholden to any type of partisan sectarianism. And, we shouldn't be either.
And that's what's up. That's what's up. So you see, my brother is highly esteemed, highly decorated. And so what we're about to do is put each other on the hot seat. My brother's gonna ask me a series of questions. I don't know what they are. Didn't get them ahead of time for 20 minutes. I may answer. He may not like my answer and make me elaborate, or he may move on to the next question. When his time is up, then I'll take over and put him on the proverbial hot seat for 20 minutes, and we'll do it the same way. Once that's over with, we will open it up to the chat to come in and ask either one of us questions. We probably take maybe 3-4 people at the most, so we can get out of here, get back to our lives. But that is how we're gonna do it. So I'm gonna get my timer ready, and I'm gonna let our esteemed guests have at it first. And give me 1 second, and I'm gonna get my timer ready, and then we can kick this off. So remember, we did not ask each other. We did not share with each other what these questions were going to be ahead of time. So I don't know what he about to ask whatsoever. So he trying to catch me off guard for some reason. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but we shall see. So I got the timer set at 20 minutes. I am ready when you're ready, my brother.
All right. Okay. Yeah, this is something that we were going to kind of do offline. So pardon me if it gets a little intrusive. Not intended to do that. So in the past, when we've talked together, we talked about issues of science, theology,
Hey,
culture,
wait a
history.
minute. Should I start the time?
Yeah, sure. If you want to. Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Just want to say another thing too, that just in terms of my own personal background, I kind of left some things out. Do have a business. I do have business and science background. I graduated in a science degree, computer science at Berkeley, and went to Stanford for business school. So worked in technology and research and development for many years. So have dealt with scientists at all levels. And I can say for sure that the Bible has in all kinds of different oppositions. I mean, the people at Berkeley, Stanford, and Silicon Valley can come up with some pretty tough questions. And so the Bible has held up much better than I ever imagined. I had confidence in it would, and it far exceeded my expectations. Okay, that's the end of my intro. So let's go to a topic that we've talked about many times. And this is first, not knowing if you still feel this way. You had said in the past that the God of the Bible, because of things that happened in your own personal life, which I've had similar things. Jacobus has had similar things happen in his life as well. He's had, with children and so forth, and evil, especially the children, that you feel that the God of the Bible, even though you've gotten more respect for Christianity as a whole, that the God of the Bible is either evil or omnipotent. Is that or impotent? Do you still feel that way?
Well, I wouldn't say I necessarily feel that way. Uh, in a like in reality, I would say though I still see how it can be, or he can be understood that way or interpreted that way though.
Okay, fair enough. So this is for the maybe the old Pianki, if there's any of him left, and then also there are other people that do have these kinds of thoughts, as you alluded to. So it's the things that one thing is that when we look at like disasters and things like that, right? Um, there's a couple of things. One is, what about say all the children, in terms of like this grievous one about children, innocent children dying, compared how many, what about all the children that didn't die, right? The children that actually had decent lives, and how could that square with a God who's actually evil?
Well, that's one of the things that I had to consider
Mm-hmm.
before actually saying that, going into taking into consideration that this God would actually exist and be the God of this universe and all of that, right?
Yeah.
I would have to take into consideration the children who survived cancer and accidents and even circumstances of birth that would not deal. So that has to go into consideration when saying this guy is absolutely evil or must be evil, etc. So that's why I didn't commit to that, but said I could still see how that could be somebody's understanding.
Understood. Okay. And so a lot of these questions now are sort of like almost obsolete, because they came from a time when we had first met, and since
You waited too long to come back on,
yeah,
man.
yeah, but I'm glad. That's a good thing too, right? Another thing too is, and maybe my section will be a little shorter than 20 minutes. which would be quite a first. So,
Can't,
yeah,
can't leave me around the GTB Wash and Trey and all them dudes and me not learn
yeah,
something.
okay,
Shout out to the brothers.
yeah,
And,
absolutely,
and my little bro, nobody.
yeah.
So
Okay, there's a couple things too that hopefully will buttress the new, understanding that has come up recently, and that is regarding God Himself. Um, would you die for like the way that you felt about God, right,
mhm.
in the past, right? Would you die for someone who felt that way about you?
Would I die for someone who felt that way about me?
Yeah,
Um, depends on who that someone is, and what our relationship is.
a stranger, a complete stranger that just despises you, thinks you're evil, thinks you're worthless and impotent, and wouldn't give you the time of day.
Would I die for that person?
Correct.
Not knowingly.
Yeah.
I mean, I might push that person could feel that way about me, and I might push them out of the way of a car or something like that and get hit because
Mhm.
I would try to do that for somebody, but and not knowing that they hated me, that would just kind of be sad on my end. But other than I wouldn't do it knowingly. Nah.
Yeah, understood. And that's what Jesus did for us, right? That He died for His enemies. That while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us in Romans, right? So, and then I guess we can take it, don't have a whole lot left of this, but there's one thing that I, kind of leave. This is probably the briefest 20 minutes I've ever spent in my life, but uh, the one thing that I would like to just kind of close with and share, for at least right now, for you in times of doubt, and then for others here who might still have those types of sentiments, is that there's things in life that we don't understand, and there's things in life that we will never understand, and we need, would you or can't, or we should, I'd recommend that we should, in those times, leave room for the possibility, which is actually an actuality, but the possibility that God might and does have a much bigger picture than we do of life and of His purposes and of why things happen. So just like we, with like infant children, any of us, that have had infant children, there are things that we do if we are good parents that either protect them or um, that look like they're very bad things, to those children from those children's perspectives. And there are things that they do not understand and cannot understand while they're like 1.5, 2, 3 years old about why we do what we do. And even we as adults have very limited understanding. Doesn't matter how old we are, how much we've been through, what we've done, or what we know or think we know, that we do have limited understanding, and we'll always have limited understanding. There's a lot of things we'll never understand and can't grasp, can't can't deal with emotionally or whatever else. And in those times, we should leave room for, even if we don't, whatever view we have of God, at least for the possibility that God sees a bigger picture that we cannot understand, especially when it comes to bad things and disasters, right? That's something, that's often counterbalanced by the good things and the things that we didn't get punished for that we should have. And, and just leave, room for that. Okay, that's really my hot seat. I guess it wasn't too hot for you, given that your new, change of mind, which is cool. That's cool for me.
I thought you was gonna ask me some questions about Kemet or Black existentialism or even agnosticism or something. You let me off easy.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, okay. Well, since I have a little more time and on that topic, um, why did you leave Kemet?
Well, because it was more so my interest gonna always be, or one of my main interests in terms of history is gonna always be ancient Kemet, or Tawi, whatever people want to call it, because it's so everybody's so wrapped up in different ways of interpreting this ancient society. But so that's always gonna be of interest to me. Like I got it tattooed on my arm all the way up to here. So, but from a spiritual standpoint, is not something that I was ever like interested in, and so it's always it was always kind of like, okay, I'm interested in the mythology and the history and the culture and how I could even like in an allegorical sense apply some of these stories to our time now.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it comes to the spiritual aspects, I'm not really looking for a spiritual anything. My thing is, if you're gonna go to church, just go to church. I'm good. I'm not looking. I'm not gonna pray to my ancestors and then make fun of people who pray to Allah or Jesus, because if I don't believe that God exists, then I'm praying to my ancestors who gone and probably prayed to stop whatever took them out of here. So it just and that's not an insult to people who feel like they can be empowered by that. But just for me, I honor my ancestors by recalling conversations I had with my grandmother about her mother and her grandmother, or my grandfather and his grandfather, and remembering things that they told me that could push me forward when I'm in a dark place or I'm feeling discouraged. I can call back to conversations I had with them. I can honor them by talking to my kids about them. I got a 18-year-old who act just like my grandmother, and so I can go visit they final resting place, and so things like that. But praying to them and making requests and things of that nature, then that's stuff I got to do for myself.
Yeah.
I can't depend on them to do that no more. I got to get it done myself. Can't nobody do that but me. So that's where the conflict came in, and you don't want to get disrespectful because traditions are important. So if that's important to other people, then I got to respect that. So I don't want to be constantly, questioning why this occurs or why you do this or why you do that, when I can just let that be what it is and respect it, and they can respect my perspective.
Okay. And how do you define existentialism, and what drew you to it? I mean, and how satisfying is it at the end of the day, for you? Is there still this gap? What's up?
Well, existentialism is just a philosophy that studies human existence. So, and excuse me, Black existentialism is just that same philosophy from the perspective of being Black. And so you have philosophers like Franz Fanon or Lewis R. Gordon who dig deep into issues of race, uh, and how race sort of perpetuates into a, a, a thousand different issues, socially, psychologically, economically, and spiritually, and all of these other things, depending on what your circumstances was in that Black existence. And so it basically comes down to, regardless of religion, God, country, government, etc., whatever Black people do, they have to push themselves forward and get that thing done. You could be a Christian, you could be an atheist, you can be comedic, you can be a Orisha practitioner, and still be a Black existentialist, because it's about the Black existence as an individual, but also as a collective. So you can move forward and try to push yourself and your people forward in power, but as long as you know you are responsible for doing it, and you have to act in order to do so, and it's irregardless of what you believe in or don't believe in.
Okay. So what do you feel is the purpose of human existence, and what happens afterwards? Like when you kick off, when it's time for you to say goodbye to this world?
Well, for me, the purpose for human existence is to take care of your whatever you obligated to take care of, whether it's yourself, your children, your parents, whoever this life makes you responsible for. Because sometimes you know you're responsible for your spouse and your children, but sometimes that extends to aunts. My aunt died in November, Thanksgiving, as a matter of fact, and about 2 weeks before that, my wife and I were helping her with her, get her bills in order, because at that stage in her life, we all in the family, to a degree, had become responsible for. So it don't necessarily have to be, your kids or your spouse, but you're responsible for those people. But sometimes you become responsible for your parents the way they were responsible for you, or grandparents, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. And so to me, the purpose of human existence is to be responsible to those who you're responsible for, to take care of your responsibilities, whatever that may be. And as long as you're doing that, you're doing what you're supposed to do. You fulfilling your obligation to what you were put here for. So as far as what happens when we gone, I have no idea. No idea. I hear everything from you're gonna go to heaven or hell to you when you're dead, you're dead. So I've never died, so I couldn't tell you. So and none of the people who have an idea about it, none of them have died to come back and say what's what. So I don't think, in reality, nobody knows what happens unless they died and came back to tell the tale. But even when people have died and been resuscitated, some have similar stories, but they all different, and some don't experience anything at all. So who you gonna believe? And that's usually indicated on what you already believe. So I have no idea. And I'm 46 and I ain't in a hurry to find out.
No, I'm not either. So in your current walk and your path, right, are there any gaps? Like, are there any glaring gaps or anything that you feel is like there's just something missing?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely.
What are those?
And it, just little circumstances here and there happen to kind of, make you raise your eyebrow, or, tilt your head a little bit. And I share with you and the audience something that happened recently. Two things, actually. So last summer, an elderly lady, and my wife and I, we moved out to, Quoddy Fingers, a more affluent area, because we wanted our kids to be in a better school district. So for the longest time, we didn't see a lot of people who look like us. And as time has moved on, we are seeing that. So I see this little lady in Quick Trip, excuse me. And the only reason I remember what I had on this day is because of her. I was still recovering from getting knee surgery, and I had on some fatigues, like joggers, and some tennis, some Jordans, the Jordan ones, the only ones I wear. So and I just a white t-shirt, like similar to this one, and the camouflaged hat. And she, as soon as I walked in, she was like, "Boy, you look good." And I was like, she was like, "Yeah, you." I've never seen this lady before in my life. So I just laughed, said thank you, you know. I go get my sweet tea, sunflower seeds. I check out, I walk out. She's standing there waiting for a car to come up. And she was like, "Boy, I just gotta tell you again, you look good." I say, "I appreciate it. The way you put that together." I'm like, my little just jogging pants and a t-shirt. But okay, I appreciate it. So she say, before you go, I just want to tell you, you know the Lord ain't gave up on you. And I was like, "Yeah, yes, ma'am," you know. And so she said, "I'm for real now." That just like stopped me and kind of put her hand out. She was like, "I'm for real now." I was like, "Yes, ma'am." So now I'm not thinking I'm ever gonna see this lady again. So about two weeks, maybe 3 weeks later, I'm in the Walgreens by my house. I could walk to it in 5-10 minutes. I go in there. She in there. Now, the first time I seen her, I didn't know who she was with. But this time I see her with a white family. And it's a church up the way. I think it's called The Door or something like that. But for those who familiar with O'Fallon, I think it's called The Door. But anyway, the guy is the pastor or one of the pastors. And this is like his wife, his kids. And they kind of helping her, you know, get around. And this ain't no Sunday. This is like a Saturday. And so she was like, "Hey, how you doing?" I was like, "How you doing?" And she was like, "I'm all right." And I went on by my way. So when I come back up to the front, she was like, "He's still working on you." And I was like, because I'm thinking she don't even remember me from the other day. She like, because this lady had to be 80s, 90s. And so he's still working on you. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, she remembers me." I'm like, yeah, "Yes, ma'am." So they gone outside. I keep coming. I come on out. They still standing there because the gentleman went and got the car. She was like, "Yeah, baby. He ain't gonna give up on you. He gonna wear you down. I'm just telling you. He gonna wear you down to your spirit is like your head, just as bald." I say, yes, ma'am. I'm doing like this now. I'm like, I say, "Okay, see y'all later." They all right. So the last time I seen her was at a different Quick Trip. This Quick Trip is right up the street from my house. And this is when I realized the church that they was talking about, because it's right by the Quick Trip. And it was the same thing. I go get my tea. I'm getting ready to get my gas. And she was like, "Hey, how you doing, baby?" I say, "I'm all right." She said, "That's a sharp jogging suit." I say, I appreciate it." She was like, now let me ask you something. Did he catch up to you yet?" I say, "Huh? Did he catch up to you yet?" And I'm wondering I'm like, who is she talking about? Because I ain't catching it. And she say, "You know what I'm talking about. Did God catch you yet?" I say, no, ma'am." So she talking about, "Don't be playing with me." I say, all right. So I go on by my business. So maybe a month. It was probably more than a month, because I had went back to work from knee surgery. I see the family and I don't see her. But maybe they was just out, no big deal. And so I asked them, I was like, "Hey, how the young lady doing?" Because I didn't know her name. And the son said she passed away.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, "Oh, okay, sorry to hear that." And he was like, "How do you know her?" And I was like, "She always talked to me whenever she seen me. I had never met her, and then I saw her like 3 times, and she just every time she saw me, she talked to me." And what I was telling my wife, like what they said, kind of threw me. They said she didn't talk to people she didn't know, and so I was like, So and of course when I share that with my queen, she, it got to be a sign from God because
Yeah.
the lady can talk to people she ain't know. But I do have to pause and like she ain't talk to people she ain't know, but she talked to me every time she saw me. So so stuff like that. I don't just chalk it up to being osmosis. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And then the second time, this was just a couple weeks ago. Uh, I had went to this McDonald's. I stopped there probably 3 times a week on my way to work. And this time, I had forgot I had sent my wife all of the money I had on this particular card. So I hand him the card, and it's a older black man, and he always, what's going on with your brother, and we'll do our little exchange, but never talk for more than maybe a minute. I'm giving him my card, or he handed me my food, and so this particular day, I handed him a card that didn't have money on it, and I forgot that I had sent my wife all of the money on that card, and so I'm halfway to work before I realized, dude still gave me the food. So I say I'm gonna stop by there the next day and I'm gonna give them, get my whatever I get and then give them the money for the stuff I got the other day.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to him and I'm trying to explain to him that he let me get it for free and I'm trying to give him the money. He arguing with me, don't want to take the little $5. And so finally he was like, hey man, I got cars behind you. Come in, I'm gonna take my break. And I'm like, okay, like what? Why can't you just take the little $5? Why I gotta get out? But I park, I run in because I had time.
Mm-hmm.
And so he come out and he talking to me. He's like, yeah, man, I ain't taking that $5 back. And we talking, and he was like, let me tell you a story. And I was like, okay. So he says it was a man in the like mid 20th century. And I'm like, he's saying 1900s, like I wasn't born in 1976.
Yeah.
And he was like, his father passed, and the man was upset because it appeared that his father didn't leave anything for him, his mother, and his sisters to live on. And so he kind of resented him in death for that. And you know how it can be with fathers and sons sometimes. So it might have been a tenuous relationship anyway.
Yeah.
And so it get so hard that he decided to rob a bank. Now the funny thing was his father had this dusty coin collection, and out of spite, because his father never let them touch it, he was just gonna throw that out. And then he had a gun that had been handed down to his father, but it didn't look like much. He used that to rob a bank to try to bring in some kind of income. So he got away with a couple $1,000s. And of course, they ended up catching up with him. So it turned out the gun he used for the robbery to get that couple thousand was worth over 100,000.
Whoa. Mm-hmm.
The dusty coin collection that he wanted to throw away ended up being worth over 200,000. So his father actually did leave him something that he could have provided for his mother and his sisters with. He just didn't know it. And so the moral of the story from this man in McDonald's drive-thru to me, who he never talked to for more than a minute,
Mm-hmm.
was sometimes we go out searching for stuff we already have. God has always been with you, even though you didn't know it or you weren't necessarily concerned with him being there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, this how I want to look, but I'm just sitting there like, okay, I appreciate it. And I even took it to, I'm like, yeah, I'm telling him this. I equate that to my wife because, when I was younger, I'm looking he was like, no, I'm talking about God. And I'm like, yeah, I tried to work that thing, but he ain't gonna let me. So
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, brother, I appreciate it. And he was like, all right, man. And when I've seen him since, he ain't mentioned it. It ain't just we carry on like we had before that. But just out of the blue, this is what he choose to tell me. So I'm just like, so stuff like that. I'm like, I tell my wife all the time. I'm like, why do these older people just out of nowhere just and because that those two examples, I'm not even joking,
Mhm.
is far from the only examples I got. Like this stuff been happening. I'm 46. This stuff been happening since I was in my 30s. Just random older people just start talking to me out of nowhere. And I used to tell my wife, this is what I get for hanging with older people. Because I used to always be with my grandparents. And then when I got older, I hung with my father and his friends. I'm like, do they think I'm their age or something? Like, what? Why? But you know, it's never like arbitrary conversation. It's always something of the spiritual persuasion. So, you know, I don't feel like that's just random,
Yeah.
but regardless of what anybody else thinks.
Hmm. Yeah, I do want to share something from my own life along the same lines. Is that I didn't have the kind of dramatic experiences that you did, but there were little things in my life that I just couldn't ignore, right? And then one thing that came up while you were sharing, just because of this, I didn't think of it when I asked you the question, but when just before I got accepted Jesus Christ, I was into a whole lot of different, new age stuff, but was really one deep thing that I did a lot every day was meditation, right? So I used to meditate a lot and had, kind of interesting experiences sometimes. And a couple years, and this wasn't even conscious, right? I noticed a few years after I got saved, it just occurred to me that I hadn't meditated since then, right? And it wasn't like anybody told me this is from the devil and, you got to stop. It was just, I realized that I had found something better, right? And I think that's what's going to happen with you if the Lord, says the same, and you keep on this path these old folks got you on, and your wife. You're going to find out that this gap won't be there anymore.
Yeah, hey, I mean, listen, I don't question fate no more. Whatever happens, whatever gonna happen will happen. So we shall see.
Mm-hmm.
So now, are you ready to sit in the hot seat, my friend?
Well, I have a feeling it'll probably be harder than yours was, but yeah.
I suspect it will be.
Okay.
But I don't know. I might go a little easy on you since you went so easy on me.
No, no, that wasn't intentional.
No, I know. And I'm joking. I'm not gonna go easy at all.
All right.
But let me know when you're ready, and I'll start the timer.
Ready.
All right. So now, you do you believe in the slogan, uh, "God is good all the time," or you know that I forget how it go, but uh, God is good, and I think the saying after that is all the time. So God is good all the time. Do you believe in that saying?
Uh, yes, within context of the Bible. Yeah, yeah. Overall, yes, within context, meaning that, um, like it alluded to before or shared before, uh, that doesn't mean when the Bible says, for instance, all things work together for good to those that love God and call according to His purpose. That doesn't mean that all things are good, right? That it means that God is able
No,
to
no,
work.
no, no,
Yeah.
no. I'm just talking about God Himself. Is God Himself, like the being, good all the time?
Yes.
Okay, okay. And you said that's biblically correct.
That's biblically correct.
So is it anywhere in the Bible that says the opposite of that?
No, not in context. No. Meaning that, like, if you're looking at the verse in Isaiah that says, I create light and darkness, I make good and create evil. I, the Lord, do all these things. That is referring to trouble. And that's referring to, that's not referring to moral evil. It's referring to things that have evil effects, or, in that day, bad effects, trouble.
You say it's referring to. So does it say trouble in the Bible?
In the newer translations, yes. In the King James, some of the words in the King James translation have changed meaning since 1611. So the actual structure of language and the meanings of words has changed for some of the words there.
So
Yeah.
would you categorize trouble as good?
No.
So if God is being categorized, that because you said so when you said trouble, were you referring to something God said about himself or something God did?
Something that God said about himself. So trouble as in calamity, right? I mean, he actually does cause calamity at times. But again, this has to be, this is a God as a being of his nature is good. There's no darkness in him. However, there is darkness in the universe because of sin and evil in the universe that he did not, originate, and that has consequences. And so there are two types of consequences. One is general consequences, which are, like the earth having natural calamities here and there that sometimes that actually kill people. Another one is consequences of sin, and the consequences of sin are twofold.
So who caused that natural calamity though?
It's a consequence of sin. It's like throwing a rock in water, right? So once sin happens, right, it's like
no. What I'm asking is just who caused the calamity? Like who creates the calamity? What, like if it's a natural disaster, a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, who creates that? Where does that come from?
That comes from God.
Okay, so if God is creating these things, these disasters, then are these disasters good?
No.
But
they can be. Like, for instance, it depends, right? So for instance,
so
hurricane,
wait. A disaster can be good.
An earthquake can relieve tension in the earth that will cause a lot more damage if it's not released. So that doesn't mean it's good in its effects to everyone, right? But it is also, like I said, there's two things. It's also a consequence that came about because of sin entering the world, right? Sin didn't just destroy people. It actually upset the natural order. And now these natural orders, these are laws of, physics, geology, chemistry, and so forth that do take effect. Right?
Hold on, real quick, Rob. Hold on. Yeah. Who being disrespectful in the chat? What's going on?
I don't even see the chat. That's all right.
I see.
Let me close my document here.
If it is any disrespect, please cut it out. I mean, y'all men talking to men, handle y'all business, but respect, okay, please. But go ahead, Rob. My bad.
Yeah,
I just saw something, and I just wanted to address it right quick. Go ahead.
Yeah. So there's two things, two ways this works. One is there are physical laws in the universe, right? So there's geology, the way magma runs through the earth and so forth. And these, some of that was upset by sin having entered the world. So there's calamities, natural calamities have that happen that would not have happened had that not taken effect, right? That's one. Another thing is that sometimes, God does punish people, for sin, or nations for sin, and there'd be things like droughts or famines and those sorts of things too. So
Okay.
that doesn't mean that he is not good. That just means that there are two consequences of
So he's good. He just does bad things.
he does things that
If
are,
it's a disaster,
yeah.
and
Well,
and
in
and
that sense, yeah, yeah,
by
yeah.
virtue of it being a disaster is bad. And if God created it, then and he's good, then he's good. He just does bad things. Because if he created this, ain't like it's a disaster. So like we can't redeem a disaster, can we? It's a disaster. So if that came from God and God is good, then he can be just like me, where I could be bad and do good things. I guess he can be good and do bad things.
It's there's a little more to it than that, right? That
But you don't have to explain it, because I got another question, and I'm getting kind
no,
of
no, no, do at least just kind of want to finish it. Is that
go ahead.
again? These are things, and these are things that are not necessarily easy to accept, right? These are things that, or even understand. But again, uh, God is consistent with His nature and His purpose, and there are rules and principles that God has put into effect in the universe. What happens is that when it comes to things like natural disasters and disasters in general, right? These are uh, in the bigger picture, the consequences of what happens in a universe that is tainted and ruined by sin, right? And so that's just, these are the rules. This is the way things work. And sin or evil or
So,
wrong,
it's
it
because of
it it,
sin
does- it,
that
it
that God
impacts
does
more
bad
than
things.
just, hold on. Oh, yeah, hold on. Just a, yeah, yeah, that it impacts, the impacts of it are greater than the immediate act. It's like, again, like throwing a rock in the water, and there's all these ripple effects and secondary and third order, second and third order effects, and that just, they happen, and that's just the way it works, right? You whack your head against the wall, you break your head. That's the way it works. And then same thing, sin comes into the universe. There's certain things in the natural order and that are going to happen that would not have happened had sin not entered. And one dramatic contrast to that is in the new heavens and new earth that are coming. There's going to be no more, and this is prophesied in Isaiah. It's shown in Revelation that there's going to be there be no hurt or harm, in God's new world, because He's going to create a new heavens and new earth with no evil, no sin, no wrong, and therefore no consequences of evil or sin or wrong are going to happen. There's going to be no natural disasters and earthquakes and volcanoes blowing up and lava, wiping out towns and stuff in the new world. And that wouldn't have happened in this world had sin not entered. So that's the context that things have to be, need to be seen in to really be to really understand how that can work, given God's nature. Another thing too is that God is just. He's not just good, but He's just. So that means that sin has to have consequences. That good actions have consequences, bad actions have consequences. And one of the consequences of sin is a ruined world, a ruined life, ruining other people's lives. There's the whole idea of a victimless crime is pretty, it isn't quite as neat and tidy as people would like to think it is. And so that, so those things, so within that context, we're living in a fallen world. And within that context, disasters happen. Those disasters happen in as a consequence of the rules that God set up before all of this. And And one of the things about him is that often that he saves us from the consequences of those disasters when he doesn't have to. So yes,
Okay.
those things are bad, right? And it's one of these things. Here's another example. Okay, um, uh, God has, like, for instance, in Deuteronomy and in Leviticus, the last chapters of Deuteronomy and Leviticus, God sets a set of rules for the nation Israel. Okay, and He says, "Look, if you obey my law, then I will, grace your land. I'll bless your land. You can have your festivals." Like, there were 3 times that all the males were required to go to Israel. He said that during those times, your enemies, I'll make it so that your enemies don't even want your land to invade it while all of your warriors are gone. All right, so if you obey, if you don't obey, here's the rules, right? Then you're going to be hit with plagues and diseases, calamities, wars. You're going to lose your land, and then there's a series of things of escalating penalties that happen if they don't obey. And then the last one is going to be, look, and if you still don't obey after all these other things happen, then I'm going to exile you from this land completely. And that's what He did, right? Because they didn't obey. They kept going with their idolatry and other sins that they were doing, and so He took them out. Like Nebuchadnezzar took the first, the northern kingdom over to Babylon, and then the Medo-Persians took the southern kingdom afterwards. Because the southern kingdom, even after they saw the northern kingdom go in exile, they didn't change their ways anyway. They didn't change their ways even after that. So these are rules that God is, that God has set in place. He's kept His word. He's kept His promises, and He's also just. That He doesn't, that there are consequences that happen
Let me ask you
because of
this,
the rules.
and I get it, and it still bring us back to, even though from the standpoint that you coming from, he good, but clearly if and like I say, it actually say in the Bible that does a disaster come to a city unless the Lord has done it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the implication is that the biblical writer is concluding that every kind of incident that comes to a city is ultimately from the Lord. And so, and basically, he asks a rhetorical question that can't be explained any other way but that. And so, I think that's pretty clear. And let me ask you this: do you believe in an intelligent divine creator?
Absolutely. And also, just one last, little snippet there is that when, God is good, to have that sentence be, correct, biblically correct, saying God is good, but He does bad things. You're using a different definition of good and bad, right? So in other words, when you say God is good, that is a moral statement. Okay. So that is a statement of His character, of His being, of His own person. When you say, then in the second half of the sentence, when you say He does bad things, He doesn't do morally bad things, meaning that He is not being immoral and sinful and wrong when these things happen. These are things that have bad impacts, bad effects, right? And but that doesn't mean He is morally bad. And that's a gap that is hard for us to really understand if we don't really understand how the consequences of sin work, right? And how God is just and righteous at the same time, right? So really, what's happening? It's a definitional difference between the first part of that sentence and the second part of that sentence. So
I
that's,
got you.
yeah,
I
okay,
got, I got you. But
yeah.
remember, you on the hot seat. So
Yeah. No, I just want to make, but I also want to be clear and not
I
say,
I,
and not put
I,
my foot in my mouth to try to,
I,
misrepresent God in some
I,
way.
I got you. I got you.
Yeah,
So you believe in a divine, intelligent creator, right?
absolutely.
So uh, let me ask you this. So when you see like Siamese twins, um, people, conjoined at the head, uh, children like my daughter that passed with chromosome defects and things of that nature. Um, and just all kinds of birth issues and being born with conditions that's not going to be conducive to a comfortable life, to say the least, and not a very long one either. When you see things like that, how do you square that with being intelligently designed?
It's I guess the one of the analogies that we could come up with is, or maybe to help understand, is suppose, all right, my little my little boy's friend, uh, he took my little boy's iPad and threw it against the wall. Right, he got into a fit, threw it against the wall. So that broken iPad never worked the same again. Right, and eventually it died, and but the short life it had afterwards, um, it just never worked. And I've had other things like like if you get a corrupt, like a virus, in your computer system, right? Uh, your computer may never work again the same way. And so that's really what happened again in the beginning when sin entered the world. Sin is a destroyer, and it affects the spiritual, it affects the mental, it affects the emotional, it affects the physical. So once Adam sinned, then he
But
died.
but the
No,
but
let me
what,
finish. Okay.
what's saying? Because I'm trying to. I get that for people who come, like they come into the world and eventually sin.
No,
But
no, no. Let me
but
finish.
what how,
Let me finish.
what sin have? Because that's the confusing part for me when we talk about
Mhm.
this type of thing. Where does sin come into play in this instance? Because if they born like that, what could they have? What sin could they have committed? So
That's
it's
not
not they sin.
correct. What it is I was about to explain. Sorry, I didn't get to the point. Finish the explanation fast enough. Is that again sin when it entered the human race destroyed everything. It corrupted everything. It corrupted the spiritual, caused spiritual death right away. It corrupted the mental and emotional, and it corrupted the physical. And so the you know our genetics, everything, was impacted. So we started at that point to die, right? Adam lived 930 years. And after that, people's lifespans got shorter and shorter. Disease came in. And since he's the progenitor of all of us, uh, his defects passed on to all of us, right? And so you have things, that are just whack. And it's just like having a virus enter a healthy working computer system, is that there's certain things that just don't work. They're not going to work. Your Microsoft Word isn't going to work anymore, or whatever it is, right? And every once in a while, you're going to get this glitch that kills your system. That's the analogy, right? So sin destroys everything. It's not just a spiritual. It's not just a spiritual problem. It doesn't just cause spiritual problems with people; it causes physical problems too. So,
So
and that so those defects, get passed on. We have defective genes, because of that, and then sometimes these defective genes, a lot of it, if I don't know, in genetics, there's like all of these different combinations of things that happen, and I'm not trying to equate the Bible exactly with genetics, but just but just the way it works is that you've got if you have like these defective chromosomes somewhere, then every so many generations, these things are going to combine the right way or the wrong way, and you're going to wind up with a birth defect, right? But if we had perfect chromosomes, perfect DNA, that wouldn't happen. And it's just one of those things, like, that happen, just like natural disasters, like the world, like the earth became unproductive instead of, like, I guess, a lush garden or whatever it was, and pests and all of that. Like there's things that happen.
Can can
As a
we
consequence of that.
can we can we prove in any way outside of rhetoric, can we prove that sin is the reason for these birth defects or chromosome defects and things of that nature? Is it a science book or genetics book that we can look at that would break down how sin causes cellular degenerate? Like, is it any kind of, how do we determine that sin is the cause of these things, or is that just from a religious standpoint?
From a physical, from a physical standpoint like that, it's you probably can't. The the most the real proof, and this is, with the Bible of itself, is whether or not Jesus Christ rose from the dead, right? Because
So it is strictly from a religious standpoint, then.
Depends on how you view it. From your perspective, probably so. But
No, what I mean is, if you don't believe certain things that fit into that particular religious paradigm, then it's no other way for you to unless you look scientifically at why, then you can't. That's the only reason to believe that sin has something to do with it. Is what I mean.
yes, but there's other things that are okay. Two things. One is that proof is the willingness to believe evidence, right? Meaning that if you'll see where I'm going in a minute with this, right? Which is that you can, just by analogy, you can try to explain to a MAGA person about systemic racism. You can produce every evidence possible, and they won't believe it. Okay, because they're unwilling to accept evidence as proof. With the Bible, there is not as much proof in many areas, but if you, but in terms of religious, okay, so think, for instance, if you, there are some consequences. Like if you go out and
Let me rephrase.
shoot your veins full of drugs, say, right? You can, that is, illegally, using some harmful substance is arguably a sin, right? Alcoholism, right? You can scientifically prove that alcoholism will destroy your body, right? You can scientifically prove that drug addiction.
That's why I wanted to say, let me rephrase the question, because we're not talking about, we can look at how alcoholism can be harmful to you, regardless of if you believe it's a sin or not. We could see why it would be harmful to you. You don't have to believe it's a sin. What I'm asking specifically is there any proof outside of it being from a religious standpoint or a belief standpoint that it can be determined that sin causes genetic defects at birth, or chromosome defects, or Siamese twins and things of that nature? Is it any proof outside of you just simply believing in whatever religion has a concept of sin? Is it any proof that you can tell me about?
Well, directly and ongoingly, that is beyond the ability of science to do. I mean, science is
so it's no.
right.
Okay.
Except for There are, and I forgot the term for it. There are known genetic, um, and I forgot the term for it, but there are known genetic conditions that can survive or pass through like one or two generations uh, because of the behavior of a parent into their children or often grandchildren, right? Those things are not permanent. They're not lasting. They're not like skin color or stuff like that. And and I forgot what the term for it is, but there's a known link in a temporary sense for a link between behavior of an individual and or even their circumstances, like toxic circumstances being passed and having uh, genetic, physical consequences in their offspring. And I can look it for you, and I can PM it to you a little later, because because we're in the middle of this right now. But those are temporary, right? So that could, if you wanted to, could be considered some kind of an evidence point. But this is something. But again, the overall answer would be no, because at least from my knowledge, because there's certain things that science simply can't do, right? I mean, it's just kind of like it's like explaining emotion, or trying to explain these incidents that you shared with us about running into these older people, right? I mean, there's certain things that you just can't, that science isn't equipped to do. Just like a wrench can't dig out, you can't use a wrench to dig a trench. It's just not the right tool. So that question is just not the right tool. Now, what science can do is measure what happens today, and can look at different possible explanations and believe them or not. But what it can't do is to try to answer those types of questions that are just there. I mean, it's just not the right tool.
I got you. So let me ask you this, and this is try to keep these. I'm gonna throw three at you, just as goofy a question as I could think of, and try to keep it to yes and no, or as short as possible, so we can get to the chat. If do you believe that a person can communicate with God?
Yes.
And because before I get into this question, I need to know that. And do you feel God communicates back?
Yes.
Okay. If you were 100% certain that it was God you were communicating with, because if you believe in that, then I'm sure you've done it before in whatever way you do it. But if you believe with 100% certainty, or know with 100% certainty that it is God that you are communicating with, and God tells you to sacrifice your child the way he did Abraham, would you do it? Or would you, I guess a better question would be, would you be willing to do
it? God would not do that. God would not
do
that.
No. I'm not asking if he would or if he wouldn't. I'm asking if he did, would you do it?
Well, if I was back in Abraham's day, walking in Abraham's
no.
Okay.
Not in Abraham's time, in 2023, January 26.
God, the answer is that God would not do that.
That's not the question. Now, if you don't want to answer, that's fine. You don't have to.
Okay, but I'm not going to answer a question that doesn't.
Well, if you don't want to answer, I understand. But I wasn't asking if God would do it. I was asking is if remember, this is God, so it's not a question of if he would or if he wouldn't.
In this case,
the assumption is already that he did. So it's not about if he would or if he wouldn't.
Yes, it
We
is.
we hypothetically saying that he already did.
No,
So
you can't do
no,
that. The
no, no.
problem, no,
Yeah,
no,
we can
Bianchi, the
hypothetically
problem is you
we can
cannot.
hypothetically say I flew. So we can hypothetically say God did an action. Not to say that he ever would in reality, but for this question, that was the question. Not if he would. I can't fly, or I wouldn't jump off a cliff, but we can put me hypothetically jumping off a cliff in the question. So I know you want to say that he wouldn't because perhaps he wouldn't. But hypothetically, the question was if he did, would you do it? And it was either yes or no.
No, the answer is he wouldn't do that because it's not consistent with the
Wasn't
Bible.
that wasn't the question though? That
Yeah, but
I understand where you want to go,
no,
but
it's not.
that wasn't the question. I never said would God tell you to do it. I just asked if you would if he did.
Well, it's inconsistent with the Bible.
That
Right?
that still wasn't that still
No,
wasn't
God, I'm just saying, God wouldn't do that. So I'm not
by
gonna.
virtue of the question,
Mhm.
it's inconsistent. It can be inconsistent. Like if I said I flew or if I jumped off a cliff, that would be inconsistent with me. But hypothetically, somebody could put that into a question because it's only hypothetical. So it's not meant to be what God would actually do. It's meant to be, would you obey him under these circumstances?
Well, I just have to answer. God wouldn't do that, man. So it's like maybe consistent.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah,
I would say God wouldn't do that either, or
yeah,
I would just simply say I wouldn't
yeah,
sacrifice my child. That's
yeah.
all.
Well, it's okay. We have
That that's
different. Yeah,
that you know.
yeah. We have
So
different.
even if God was consistent with that, I'm not sacrificing my child.
Yeah. So I'm not. Yeah. So we have different answers for the same question, right? But I'm just saying that my answer is God wouldn't do that, right? So it's not a question.
I understand. I
Yeah.
understand. I understand.
Yeah.
So my next one is okay. So we dealt with the intelligent design question. So are you? I know you're a proponent of saying that the Exodus actually happened. What year would you say it happened?
Uh, from the authorities I've personally read about, and haven't studied it to the degree I'd like to, but it seems to have happened in around the 12th century, 13th century under Ramesses II. That seems to be where the bulk of the evidence points now. So for me personally, I don't know. Now I know Negedi is in particular has some scholars that he came up with that believe that he follows that believe it happened probably earlier under a different pharaoh.
Yeah,
And I
G
haven't.
even
Yeah,
those scholars that make the it's like Doctor Strange, the multiverse of madness. They come up with a whole different timeline.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
like a whole different dimension. They fighting Thanos and everything.
Right, right. So for me, the mainstream seems to point towards a Ramesses II, or potentially someone during the Hyksos time period. So that's what I go with, unless I see differently somewhere down the line.
So how would you? Well, just given that's where you would point to. If I told you that Egypt or Kemet, whatever you want to call it, Tawi, that it ruled Canaan at that time. And so what they would essentially be doing is jumping out of the frying pan into the fire. How would you, what would you just shift where it happened, or how would you explain them fleeing from Egypt and going to a land that Egypt controlled?
Well, I'll respond with a question.
Go ahead.
Someone took and whooped you with a crowbar, until you couldn't move. Would you go after them if they went somewhere else to another house of yours, right? And like look at the situation, right? Pharaoh was destroyed. I mean, his advisors said Egypt is destroyed. Every one of his firstborn were gone. He lost his firstborn son. He lost his firstborn child. Everybody then he went after him again, and his whole army got drowned in the sea, right?
So
Yeah,
that's why that's my point.
yeah,
So
only a
why would I,
fool would try to.
why would I let those people get away? Because after that, what do I have to lose?
What you,
I would try to destroy take all the resources I had to destroy those people.
he already
It,
tried that. See,
no,
the thing is, they already tried that, bro.
now they over there with his Visitor Kings, and in a land that they're not even familiar with.
Yeah, but that's word gets around, right? So what happened is, like, first of all, like, first of all, they went in and well, first they did, this was, first of all, they didn't go over there right away, right? It took them 40 years to get there. They were wandering around in the desert for 40 years, so they didn't go straight to Canaan. And then when they got
Well,
there,
Egypt ruled Canaan for about 450 some years. So
yeah, no, and I'm aware of that. And so when they got to Canaan, they started cleaning the house. And in fact, when they went to, I think it was Jericho or somewhere else. It was Rahab, I think, in Jericho, who said, "Look, everybody here is scared to death of you. They've seen, they've heard about how you wiped out all these entire towns and things. Word gets back, and somebody done whooped the Egyptian army that badly, and you'd be a fool to try that again. I mean, that's what I would think. And once they took the land, it was theirs, and God wasn't going to let them, lose it. They were whooping everybody right, left, and center. The Gibeonites were a town, from Gibeon. They came and pretended they had come from a long way so that they could get protection. These people were juggernauts. They wiped out everything, and that type of disaster accomplishment that reaches far and wide, right? I mean, it just doesn't stay within. People talk. People have, and they have communications between countries, relatives here and there. It took longer back then because they were on camel instead of the telephone. I tell you, and I wouldn't, if somebody had beaten me that bad, and everything you threw everything you had at them and got wiped out every single time. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing the same way and expect a different outcome, and they ain't crazy, right? I mean, they wasn't that crazy, and so. It's not surprising to me. Another thing too is that that a lot, many times in history, there have been nominal rulerships and actual like active presence in places, and and those vary with periods of time. So it could have been more of a nominal than an active, rulership of that. Just kind of claiming it and not necessarily having a huge contingent army there. Holding things down. It didn't seem like that was the case. But at the end of the day, man, anybody got whooped that bad, they'd be a fool to try it again. I mean, I wouldn't do it.
let me ask you this. So do you believe and I know you're familiar with the story of Lot. Do you believe Lot was a righteous man?
Yeah, the Bible says he was.
Okay. So let me. So you feel that when the men in the city were knocking on Lot's door, asking for who they thought were men, but they were actually angels, and he offered them instead his daughter, his virgin daughters, knowing what these men would do to him. Do you feel that was the act of a righteous man?
Righteous people are complicated, and righteous people can do very unrighteous things, right? At times, as a pattern of life, yes, he was a righteous man. As a drastic fallen as a fallen individual, he did a deplorable thing, offering his virgin daughters. I mean, I've done things since I got saved that I'm not proud of, but I'm still saved. I'm a Christian, and but since I have in the years that I've been saved, I've done things I've deeply regretted, things that were badly wrong.
So So you do feel that's the act of a righteous man?
God's standard of righteousness is a pattern of life, and a righteous man can do unrighteous things. Give you
So that's a yes.
that's a yes with the current
Okay.
explanation. Give you another example too. Is David, right?
No,
David
no, no.
was
Let's stay on live. So
yeah, sure.
so him him wanting to give his daughters to this crowd of like I get
Well,
lustful and
animals,
the
animals.
depraved men was the act of a righteous man. So now, uh, do you think him impregnating those same daughters was the act of a righteous man?
Well, like I said, righteous people can do unrighteous things, and I think it's a sickening thing. Um, uh, but again, it's God sees two things, right? He sees a pattern of life, and he also sees fallen people that do bad things, even when many of them, and even when overall they're they're faithful, to him. I mean, and like I said, another example that could be have the same type of implications as David. David did a whole lot of bad things, right? But he was called by God to be a man after God's own heart.
But
In fact,
in
yeah.
fairness,
Mhm.
with David, like if we put the scales up and we see like righteous things David did versus unrighteous, yeah, he did some stuff that was where he made some mistakes, Bathsheba and the census, and
And the
that
murder,
was that.
he sinned.
Uriah, I include the
Yeah,
death of Uriah in the Bathsheba thing. So I
it
get
wouldn't be.
that.
Yeah,
But then, I mean, he killed Goliath. He defeated the Philistines. He united the kingdom. I you could kind of but Lot, I don't. I mean,
okay,
the
I'd say
dude
two things to that. All right.
he offered his daughters to this crowd of depraved animals, and then he himself went and slept with them. I just don't see how my guy is righteous. I can
I
see how David could still be the apple of God's eye. I just don't
Yeah,
see how homeboy was righteous. His wife had just got turned to a pillar of salt,
yeah,
and next
yeah.
thing you know, he got a daughter pregnant.
Yeah. And there's two things that I share about that. One is that what David did was far worse than what Lot did. God, David had an innocent man murdered. Lot never took anybody's life, right? And so he had an innocent man murdered to take his wife and commit adultery with her, right? So the act that David did was was worse, if you want to put it on a moral scale of depravity, right? Was a worse one than Lot. A second thing is that, in all fairness to Lot, we know a lot more about David's life than we know about Lot's. We know about one little slice of his life, Sodom and Gomorrah and in the mountains, which was a pretty poor showing in both places. But we know David's life from the time he was a child, right? And there's a whole lot more detail about David because David was a lot more important in the history of Israel and in the lineage of the Messiah than Lot was, right? So we know more about, Abraham, David, Isaac, and all those other people than we know about Lot. So if we trace the entire, um, birth to death lineage of Lot's life in that type of detail, we might see a different story about him. I don't know.
Okay, I got you. And so my last one, and we'll we'll keep it in the same vein. I think you've been handling yourself well, even though you ain't really want to answer that first question. So uh, let's do this one. Okay, so do you believe that obviously I know you're against homosexuality. Uh, do you feel that uh, it's good to kill men or women that have same sex relationships, as the Bible indicates?
That's Old Testament for Israel, and myself. That's actually a really good question. I think that given the New Testament example, uh, I would say no, because the Old Testament was it had two purposes. One is to delineate right and wrong, and punishments for different right and wrong, and then another is to show that the law cannot be followed perfectly the way that God wants us to, right? And it was a way to convict people of right and wrong, to uh, to point people to the need for salvation, because we can't be righteous according to God's standards. We just can't do it. And so that's why we need the Savior, the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So there's that's that thing. I think that and in the New Testament, there's two things um, that are taught and are about that. One is that there's no example like this whole idea of like in the medieval period where the church hierarchy started persecuting heretics and burning people at the stake and all of that stuff. There's no example, instruction, or even hint or implication of that in the New Testament in terms of what the church is supposed to do. So from that standpoint, no. Now, there's the other flip side, though, as well, of the civil standpoint, right? So the laws of any given country from a civil perspective can have any kind of number, any kind of punishments for any type of wrongdoing or transgression or whatever, which is a bit separate. But in terms of but in the in the New Testament, especially like in Corinth and these other places, Rome, they had you know pederasty. They had selling boys on the corner for sex to old men. They had homosexuality. They had temple prostitutes in Corinth that walked the streets and and grabbed guys and said, "Hey, let's go do this." They had brothels. They had all kinds of other stuff. Um, and they didn't have the church certainly going around killing everybody that did that. Now, so I think it's really kind of a separate issue of
Do you think that was more because at that point Christians couldn't do that because they themselves were being persecuted, or do you think uh, that was because it was against Christian values? Because if it was against Christian values, these purporting pious people who would later do it wouldn't have done it. I would think, or they would have at least given it a second thought. But they seem to relish in it
right.
and gather like it was a spectacle. So what was it? Because it was against Christian values? Because we see how this violence by these so-called Christians ratcheted up once Christianity became the legal religion of of the Roman Empire and the adopted religion of these European countries. Unless we just gonna talk about how violent uh, these European countries can be, but so it may not have anything to do with Christianity. But go ahead, because it didn't seem that violence didn't seem to start till Christianity was legal, as opposed to when it wouldn't?
Yeah, there's that's a good question. It's really the whole New Testament infrastructure, right? There's no the whole New Testament infrastructure is focused on repentance from sin and salvation through the gospel of Jesus Christ, uh, and uh, and so there's a moral and a so there's no hint that in the Old Testament time, again, there's no hint anywhere in the New Testament of Christians supposed to be doing that. Right now, there would be, of course, some reasonable expectation that if it's, the Christian influence in government would would be against that. But in terms of persecuting heretics and stuff like that, that's just completely alien to anything in the New Testament at all. That doesn't mean that homosexuality, like if there's laws against it, that we should fight to make it legal, that type of stuff like that. But in terms of of Christians going out and killing people because they don't believe what the Bible says, that's just not
So,
consistent.
the first disciples and apostles were Jews, right?
Yeah.
Did they stop believing in the 5 books of Moses and the laws and things of that nature? Because they were still practicing Jews.
Correct.
So they didn't stop. So they didn't stop believing that you should kill 2 men who have sex with each other then, right?
Well, from the law standpoint, no, that's right. And then, but what happened really,
so it stands to reason that they probably were doing it. We just don't hear about it in the Bible. If they believed it.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of speculative, but it's possible. I'm not saying that's impossible.
That's why I said it stands to reason to believe it, because I'm definitely speculating, but I'm speculating with the knowledge that they believed in the concept of killing individuals who had same-sex engagement.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that's a valid point. I think there's the Bible in the early church sort of took it from a different perspective, that they were more focused on, like for instance, the law. They were more focused on how the law applied to New Testament times, right, with the resurrection of Jesus Christ. So the moral parts.
Are you speculating? Because we established that they were practicing Jews.
Yeah, but that's not. Yeah, that's kind of going a little different direction. Like,
so you are speculating.
No,
if they're practicing Jews, then saying that they took a different turn on what they practice, you would be speculating, because if they practicing Jews, they practicing Judaism the way anybody else would, wouldn't
it? That's partly true, because what happened is that the earliest what they quickly went, and this is starting from Acts chapter 10 and 11, is that they understood that that nobody could follow the law, and that the law wasn't the way that God was going to bring in the kingdom. All right, so what they did was,
so the Jews that became Christians, they weren't tripping off of Jewish customs and laws no more.
Some of them were, but they weren't supposed to be, right? So they were. So in other words, the Jewish customs and traditions no longer had spiritual authority over them. So they didn't have to, for instance, follow the dietary laws, the ceremonies like the holy days, and in the non-moral parts of the law. The moral parts of the law were more refocused towards who was gonna, of how to live the Christian life, right? It wasn't really focused on punishing people who were, it's within the confines of the church, and the church was not focused on punishing people for doing misdeeds. The church was focused on, look, you either make a choice of living this way, or you are not in the kingdom of God, right? So you either live this way or you're not in the kingdom of God. And it wasn't really so much that, and it was expelling people from the church. It wasn't taking them to a pit and stoning them like the Jews did, right? So the focus was slightly different. So the moral precepts were still there, but in terms of the church going out and stoning somebody, that just wasn't the way to. Now, in terms
So
of the
basically, even though they
law,
were Jews,
pardon?
oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the civil law, that was a different story, right? So the civil law, is in Romans, it says that, that the law is to, punish evildoers, right? That's what the civil authorities are there for. And the church was focused on the spiritual, which is that in First Corinthians and in Galatians, that all of these people who do these things, and in First Timothy, that all of these people who do these things shall not inherit the kingdom of God, and that when they did these things, if they didn't repent of them, in First Corinthians 5, like for instance, that if they don't repent of these things, they're to be expelled from the church, right? It
So
isn't to take them to a pit and kill them.
so once these Jews became Christians, they basically put Jew, Judaism or the Jewish religion to the on the back burner, because it's always said that to me that Christianity is just a continuism, or it's essentially the same uh, religion, that there was no new religion being formed. This was always the one uh, belief system that everybody should have been following and adhering to. So these Jews did then start following a different religion if they put those laws that were essential to being Jews to the side, right?
It's almost it's that Christianity is the fulfillment of the Jewish religion, meaning that it's the advent of the Jewish Messiah and the new spiritual kingdom that was talked about in the prophets. All right, so it's a little kind of orthogonal, to what you're saying is a little orthogonal. So um, when Jews became Christians, they did not cease being Jews in
Right.
that
No, I
sense.
know
Yeah,
ethnically they were Jews, but in terms of the law and the things that they practiced, that they established at Mount Sinai, or wherever they were,
mhm.
those things seem to no longer be important. If it because and the reason I'm asking is because a lot of times I get like what you said regarding killing same sex lovers. That was in the Old Testament and in the law and in the New Testament, etc. So those things no longer apply, even though that they were said to be practicing Jews and going to the temple and things of that nature. They really weren't then, because they weren't worried about those laws. They were worried about Christianity. The Jewish customs or laws and practices were no longer relevant. Or
They were,
or
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. They were. It's not that they were no longer relevant. They actually got kind of split into two or three different categories. And one category is the spiritual fulfillment of law, like we said. Like one is that is righteousness. What is the foundation of righteousness? Because that's really what the law was. It was a standard for righteousness, right? And so for being right, can't consider righteous before God. So that standard uh, changed, right? It changed from obedience of the law, sacrifices, holy days, to faith in Christ, right? So that is the risen Savior and the promised fulfilled Jewish Messiah. So that's one thing. Now, then there was the more customary stuff that you did as being a cultural Jew, right? So you might observe Hanukkah or that sort of stuff, which isn't in the Bible, and these sorts of things, right? Or have these certain customs that you do just because you're Jewish cultural. So that's the second, right? And that's sort of optional, part of being the family, part of the community, and that sort of thing. The third is the actual Mosaic law in terms of, again, the third is the Mosaic law. So as a Jew, you did not, who is now a Christian, you did not have to obey, again, the dietary laws, the holy days, in the ceremonial aspects of the law any longer. If and so sacrifices, that's another thing. Yes, that's what I was looking for. Okay, so no more sacrifices for sin. That's off the table because Jesus is the sacrifice. The holy days and the dietary laws became optional. So there were Jews that could do that. You could do it or not if you wanted to, because it's not binding anymore. The moral parts of the law were still binding morally, but by that time, actually since the exile, the actual penalties for disobeying a law were a more of a civil matter than a religious matter, right? So they had not, you had to go through civil procedures to do whatever it was, like, cut your hand off, whatever, put people in jail or whatever it was. And those things were decided more at a civil level. And even in New Testament times, the Roman government really determined those things because Israel, Canaan was a Roman colony, and so Roman law prevailed. And what they did have was kind of an exception where they would allow the Jews to sort of govern themselves. But at the end of the day, Roman law took precedence, and the actual punishment of infractions of different kind became a civil matter. Right. So even in New Testament times, that was the case. Like, for instance, they couldn't execute someone. Right. They had to get permission from the Roman prelate, governor, and then the Roman governor would decide whether they could execute someone, and he would actually have his people perform the execution. So you couldn't, and jailing people, they had certain rights to jail people, for certain things, but other things but they were always under the boot of Rome in terms of deciding. So it was, the civil government really decided what was the punishment for this infraction or that one. Even in New Testament time. Yeah, that's.
And I actually have one more for you,
Sure.
and then we can open it up to the chat. Do you believe women can be pastors of churches, and can you back it up with the Bible?
That's a good one. In fact, everything you came with, you brought the smoke. That's for sure. Okay, so there's there's a kind of a multi-part answer again. All right, in the Bible, the most direct answer. All right, in the Bible, if you look at that, at the wording of the Bible, the Bible does not permit that, like for especially in the office of a senior pastor and that sort of thing, bishops and so forth, right? Now that said, in the early church there were female deacons, right? And deacons, there were in the Bible there were prophetesses that were able to give prophecies, tell guys what to do, and that sort of stuff. And then in the early church there were deacons that there were female deacons, right? They've found artifacts from them and so forth. Deacons were preachers back then, right? And what happened is over time that the hierarchy, the church hierarchy, actually started consolidating power at the top and cut deacons sort of out of the preaching thing over time, right? Out of the preaching role over time. So there's two aspects of it, right? So one is that according to the Bible, that's not permitted, for senior pastorates and so forth. But also, given that there were women preachers per se, early on, and those avenues are gone. Right now, the only avenues for that being, an exercisable gift would be in some sort of ministry capacity, right? Like evangelist or whatever else. right? So from that standpoint, it's really more a renaming than it is a shift in responsibilities because, you know, because it's just the way that the structure of the church has changed since then. Now, in terms of the whole senior pastor thing, even I think there's two things. One is that uh, it's hard to, if possible at all, to substantiate that role in the Bible, right? In fact, the evidence points points the other way. The fact that it's being done is, you know, from everything in the scriptures, that is, I would say, it clearly falls into the role of more of a ceremonial matter than a moral matter. So, in other words, it's not like adultery, you know, homosexuality, stealing, lying, and that sort of stuff, right? It's a ceremonial. If it's a transgression, to the degree it's a transgression, it's a ceremonial transgression, and God has always been had a lot more leniency in the area of ceremonial transgression with the right intent of heart than he has a moral transgression, like David's adultery. One example of that would be like when Abiathar gave David the showbread, right? That was forbidden by the law to do, but the law was made for man, not man for the law. And Jesus commended Abiathar as having done that, even though that was technically a transgression of the law because he was trying to feed a hungry man, right? And God's more concerned with, you know, feeding the hungry than he is with whether the showbread sits in this place, you know, or is eaten by exactly these people. And so, to the degree that you know that it is a transgression, I would say it's more of a ceremonial transgression, and it's not really a moral one, unless, of course, it's in the heart of the person, you know, that gets lifted up by pride and this sort of thing. That's what.
Gotcha. So I put the link in the chat. I'm gonna see who come in, if anybody come in, and you know, we can see who they got a question for, you or me, and hopefully they got some questions for me because I feel like I came at you for a lot longer time than you you were able to come at me. So
Yeah,
uh,
my agenda didn't work out, which is fine, you know. But you know, it was a positive. I'm cool. I'm cool.
yeah, so let me put it back. Let me put it back in here. See if anybody got any questions for me or Pastor Robert Ash, who has a YouTube channel called, am I saying it right? The Thinker's Bible channel.
Yeah, yeah. The Thinker's Bible, exactly. Yeah, thanks.
Let me find a link for that real quick and put that in the chat. Y'all can go subscribe.
Yeah, thank you.
The brother put out some good information. If you into the Bible, you know, if you like reading the Bible, if you're a believer, whatever the case, if you want to learn something, go over to the brother channel.
Yeah, thank you. And there's actually unbelievers. There's non-believers that subscribe to the channel too. It's kind of interesting. There's a couple of people I know that are non-believers that are friends of mine, but they say they watch every single video, which is interesting. I thank God for it.
Yeah, I try to catch all of the videos when you put them out, and it looked like let's see who we got in here. We got B Wash in the building. Byron Washington. What's going on? Harvard fellow Byron Washington.
Oh man, see here you go. What's going on, good brothers? What's going on?
Hey, my
What,
brother, how
what,
are you?
what's the
I'm doing
word?
good. I'm just sitting here watching the kids and they watching me one or two. So but yeah, I got a question for you, Bianca, since you didn't get on the hot seat.
I figured as much. Hey, Robert, real quick, I don't see
Yeah.
a link for your channel, so if you got one, put it in the back chat, and I'll throw it in the chat.
Okay.
Go ahead, B.
So Let me ask you this, DMG. Um, how can you, or is it proper to reconcile having a authentic comedic worldview void of the spirituality of the comedic people? And I guess the follow up with that to that, if such is true, can one properly critique whether it be Christianity, Islam, etc., based on its view of the supernatural slash spiritual?
And this is my opinion. For me, no, it's not possible to have an authentic comedic worldview if you dismiss the spiritual aspects. And I just take it a step further. If you're not authentic in that way, you don't have room to critique another spiritual tradition, be it Christianity or any other. But if you are, um, you know, doing putting your best foot forward to practice the Kemetic spiritual tradition, and again, shout out to my brothers and sisters. Uh, I don't know how you would still critique other spiritual traditions because you yourself are in one, and so I don't know how one has the room to critique another. So either way, I don't think anybody should be trying to call the other to task.
Yes, sir.
But that's my 2 cents. That's you,
I,
Rob.
I
Okay,
went
I
Yeah,
got
out.
you.
yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, B.
No, no, my bad, man.
Going out, you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yeah, my bad. My phone went out for a second, and I missed that last sentence you made. Say that last sentence again.
See, I'm not gonna do you like you do me when my phone go out. And you got way more availability for a new phone than I do. But I ain't gonna do you like you do me. But I you said my last sentence is the one you didn't hear.
Yes, sir.
I said so for me, I don't think that you have room to talk if you're not practicing, like genuinely practicing the Kemetic spiritual tradition. I don't think you have room to critique another spiritual tradition. And if you are genuinely practicing the Kemetic spiritual tradition, I don't think you have room to critique another spiritual tradition because you yourself are practicing a spiritual tradition. And to me that's all around because if these are all quote unquote spiritual traditions, I don't see how anybody got room to talk. Now everybody gonna do what they do and trying to claim one thing or another, but in reality, to me, everybody doing a similar thing. That one one can't be more superior to the other in terms of the practice. But that's me.
All good. All good. Well, that's I was gonna do a follow up to that, but I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it alone because it would make sense to I guess at this point kind of feel like Rob, like it would make sense to ask you the follow up question because you ain't the same position you were 8 months ago. So hey,
See, I don't mind. I don't mind learning and trying to evolve. And if I make a mistake along the way, I'm willing to admit I made a mistake. But I don't try to stay stuck in the same mind frame for the sake of being stuck. So I like I said, you can't be around intelligent people and not pick up something. So, be it positive or negative, but I don't think I picked up anything I would consider negative. So I'm all good.
Yeah. So Vic Damon has a question for you. He said,
let me get him in here real quick.
yeah.
I forgot. I saw him and forgot to click on him.
That
You
says
done, bro?
That says Vic Damone Jr.
Okay. Vic Damone
What's
Jr.
up, bro?
Okay.
I got a question for the bald man.
What's your question, man?
Okay. So first, do you moisturize your head? That's first.
Every single day. Every
All
single
right.
day.
Okay. Okay. The other question is, you asked Pastor Ash here a question about a proof of sin, and I guess I first want to ask: is your understanding that sin is physical or metaphysical or something else?
Is my understanding that?
Yeah,
No.
because you asked for proof of sin. Is sin something?
Well, he said that genetic deformities and issues such as Siamese twins, chromosome defects were the result of sin.
Mm-hmm.
So I was asking, was it something that he could show outside of what he believes regarding the Bible that would be indicative of that, if that's the cause? So
right, but that's not my question, though.
And so I don't believe that sin is physical, but when he said that was the cause of those physical ailments, I just assumed that there was physical evidence.
Well, right, but that's not the question I asked, though. My question is your understanding when you were asking him the question about proof of that sin causing birth defects and that sort of thing. My question still stands: is sin something that's physical, metaphysical, or something else?
Well, my understanding and his understanding could have been different by virtue of him saying that it caused physical ailments, because I wouldn't have said that.
Well,
so no,
question.
But I already said no. That's not my understanding. So
well, right, but the reason I asked the question is because, like, if we wanted to talk about consciousness or knowledge or something like that, right? These are metaphysical principles that have physical manifestations, but you're not going to see that under an electroencephalograph or something like that. So you're not going to see something like that on there. But it doesn't mean that you can't see its effects. So I was asking because I guess I was trying to understand the premise of your question when asking for proof that sin is the cause of it.
So you would agree then that sin is the cause of physical ailments such as conjoined heads, chromosome defects, genetic defects, and things of that nature.
No, this is not an answer. You asked me a question. I'm still trying to get you to answer your question.
I already said that I don't see it that the same way. The reason I asked the question was because I made an assumption that he saw it that way because he said it caused physical ailments. My assumption, to be clear, right, wrong, or indifferent, was that if it causes physical ailments, then there would be physical evidence.
No, but I want you to think about that because this is the premise.
And remember, I'm thinking that this is his position because he made the claim. I already know what I believe sin to be, but maybe he has a different belief for what I do.
Yeah, no, I guess I'm calling you out for a straw man here because it doesn't mean that if Pastor Ash here believes,
but it can't be a straw man if I'm asking if that's what he believes, because if he believes it causes a physical ailment, why would I think he doesn't believe there's physical evidence for it?
Well, but for the same reason,
he didn't indicate that he believed the same way about sin that I do.
No, sir. Well, it can be a straw man because what you asked for was some sort of empirical evidence that sin is responsible for something physical, but it doesn't mean that sin itself is physical. Like if we talked about consciousness, or we talked about that consciousness being something that's the product of like a divine mind or something that's in biological beings, that it can't be in inanimate objects. That if I was to say that consciousness is the cause of animation in biological creatures, Like, for example, rocks don't understand language, as far as we know. We don't have any evidence that rocks understand sign language or Spanish, or that they feel love or hate or passion and that sort of thing. These things, we would all argue, and I'm sure you would as well, Pete, are the product of consciousness. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to be able to show you anything empirical. And it doesn't mean that there's no proof. I'm challenging what you were asking for empirical proof by pointing out that strict empiricism is not the only means of inquiry for showing that. And so when you were talking about that, you specifically asked for science and that sort of thing. And I'm pointing out that that was an improper question.
Okay, I got you. And so let me ask you this. Would it be proper for me to ask the question under the auspices of not knowing what his position on it is, regardless of what my position is?
No, you would ask what evidence you have for that, right? And then different fields of inquiry have different evidence possible and available to them. Everything is not strictly for empiricism. Logic, for example, is above empiricism. Mathematics is another example. 2 + 2 = 4 is not empirical. That's something that's a priori analytic. It's not synthetic.
Even if I just simply want to know if he has physical evidence to back up what I see physically, it's improper to simply ask it that way.
Yes, just like if I was to ask for physical evidence that you thought of your grandma the other day, like that it would be a ridiculous question. Like if you say, hey, I was thinking about my ancestors the other day, so give me some physical evidence.
Right. But what if you don't know if I believe there can be physical evidence for that?
Well, the thing about it, but it's not about
why
your
would
belief.
it be improper to ask a question that you genuinely don't know the answer to? So, in other words, if you think that for whatever reason you think because I worded it or however whatever the reason may be, you think that this dude believes it's physical evidence that he thought of his grandmother the other day. I'm gonna have him explain that. That still would be improper for you to ask.
Yes, because it's a category error, sir. You're asking something that's not possible of the particular category. It's a logical category error. So again, the only thing that we could see,
but even in this setting, it would be because if I'm in a setting where that would apply, or does that or is your or not your position, is that the situation universally or just in a particular setting?
No, that's the situation universally. The questions that you ask need to be relevant to the subject of inquiry. So what exegetical evidence do you have that I don't know that the lady next door to you has breast cancer? Like that question doesn't match the category. That's what I'm pointing out. So I would have asked him, what evidence do you have of that? And then he could list that. Like Robert might have talked about the universality of this understanding throughout human history. It's phenomenological in this respect, that everyone seems to agree that there is no such thing as being perfect. Everyone agrees, regardless of your religious persuasion, that there is no such thing as perfection, that there's something falling short of humanity. There was a number of ways to go with that, but you went to empiricism, and I'm just pointing out that was an improper question.
Okay, well let me ask you this, and I know I know you gotta go do whatever Vic Damone Jr. Does. That's cute. That's cute, by the way.
Yeah, you know what's going on.
But anyway, what questions would you raise about the story of the old lady and the older gentleman I told at the beginning of the show?
You're talking about the older lady and the older gentleman that you talked about seeing like at the gas station, that sort of thing.
Correct.
I don't know what questions I would raise with respect to that. I don't know. I will say, that I think it is a, sort of fascinating story, related to, the sort of metaphysical, spiritual, I think, aspect of humanity, the sort of sense perception that we have, the non-physical parts of man. where you're running into these people and they're and they're seemingly getting some sort of I'm trying to be careful with the wording here. I don't want to say reading, and then someone thinks I'm thinking like Miss Cleo or something like that. But they're picking up something, off of you after interacting with you, and understanding that there's something going on that's not evident to the physical. That there's some deeper spiritual aspect, I think, to mankind, that people are aware of, and I've heard you share different stories about this over time. The pastor of the church who I think passed not too long ago, rest in peace to that brother, and that sort of thing. So there's all sorts of things thinking like that. That they raise interesting questions for me about humanity and human nature. So I don't know. I don't know what questions I would have. I would just say, I was fascinated about the stories, and looking forward to more of those encounters for you at gas stations.
Gotcha. All right, Mr. Damone. I'm gonna let you go. And
Dick Damone Jr.
Big Mr. Damone Jr. I'm gonna let you go. Don't have if you got a lady in your life, don't have her like lifting books and doing ponytails and braiding hair and stuff like that. Because I know a guy like that, and he is irritating dude. So don't be like that guy.
Don't talk about the guest that way. He has a ponytail, clearly. But yeah, listen, please, Mr. D.M.G, don't have your lady trying to do ponytails on you either. It would be wrong.
I absolutely agree. All right, brother. Peace.
And for the record, I don't think that was an improper question at all. I think it was a perfectly valid question and made sense to ask.
Okay. Let me ask you this. For you, what if any questions would come to you regarding the encounters with the elderly people? And like I said, keep in mind those aren't the only ones. Like I said, if any, or what would your reaction be to hearing that about those encounters?
I think it's my personal opinion. It's a word from God, right? I think that because I think it's validated. I think it's valid further, ascended. I think it's further evidenced. I guess that's a good word for it, by your spiritual journey. So even from the time we met, right, until now. I don't believe any of that's coincidence. I've heard, like Jacobus was telling me, about things like you had a showdown with your Kemetic temple because he was on the show, and they said either get rid of him or, you're out of here. And you said, forget this, I'm gonna do, that I'm gonna stick by this brother. And the people that have come into your life recently that you've gotten along with the most have been Christians. That doesn't mean all of them. I mean, all of these things together are, in my mind, evidentiary. And I think that hard questions like the ones you ask are perfectly appropriate. This is something that any scientist, would ask right away, right? Especially an atheist scientist, which is, okay, you're saying that sin is, what evidence do you have for that, right? And I think that that's a perfectly valid question to ask. In fact, it's a natural one, and you'd be negligent not to ask it. And the answer is, that reasonable too, that science just isn't the right tool to prove that, right? I mean, you can't dig give you an example, perfect example of disease causing organisms, right? People used to think blood caused diseases and blah, blah, blah. But then when microscopes, were discovered, they started discovering, bacteria and viruses and, later on viruses and microscopic parasites. And at the time, before those things were invented, they just didn't, the tools they were using to try to diagnose disease just weren't the right ones, right? They weren't able, those tools weren't capable, like tasting urine and that sort of stuff, or looking at blood or whatever with your eyeballs. Those just weren't the right type of tools to actually figure out what was the source cause of a disease, right? And so it's the
Or
same answer. Yeah.
leeches bleed people and things of that nature.
Yeah,
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 it was.
exactly, right. Hang them upside down and cut them and that kind of stuff, because the bad blood and this. They were doing the best they could, and they could see evidence of certain herbs or different potions or whatever that they put together, helping with this or that and the other thing. And some of these folk remedies can do things that modern medicine cannot. Acupuncture, acupressure, folk remedies, and so forth. But in terms of discovering the source cause of things like salmonella or whatever else, right? You just they didn't have the tools, and science is like that. Like scientists often like to think they have a lot more than they do, right? They think that this is a one size fits all cure all for everything, but the fact is that science is a tool set, right? And just like your tool set, right? If you have a tool set for a car, then you can't fix a computer with those, right? And rewire, it's not the right tool. And so science is not the right tool to show, to prove, if you will, from a scientific standpoint, that sin in the beginning is the ultimate cause of, like birth defects today, right? It's just not the right tool for that. What you can do is to in terms of causation, is evaluate the Bible on its own merit, evaluate other explanations on their own merits, and see what kind of evidence there is. Now, from a scriptural standpoint, the evidence is pretty compelling, right? From other traditions, it may or may not be. From a strictly, test tube scientific standpoint, you can't. You can find evidence here and there, like this, generational skipping of genetic changes that are, temporary. You can look at that and say, hey, that's something that at least points the right hemisphere of the compass, right, toward that direction, because you can pass on, like from traumatic situations, you can have these leap in your genetic, changes in your genes and stuff for at least temporarily. So that points in that direction. And you have to figure, okay, that you can tell that these chromosomes came together in these, bad ways, and you can tell the statistics and, behind those and probabilities and that kind of stuff. And so to try to trace them back as far as you can. But at a time, science has a limit, and it really can't address that sort of thing. So I think that Vic was partially correct in this metaphysical part that he was going to, but I don't think it's correct to say that it was an incorrect question. It's not. It's a perfectly reasonable, personal, perfectly valid question. It's just that the tool set that we have through science isn't the right one to answer it.
Yeah, I see Leandre in the chat, and it seemed like him and Vic Damone agree, which I'm just so surprised about, because and I shouldn't be, because that Vic Damone dude is just as irritating as Leandre is, and I'm just compelled by how similar they attitudes are. I wonder if they know each other, like, But anyway,
I thought he was I thought he was going by a different name, actually, but maybe not. Guess I was wrong.
Look, I really did. And the crazy thing is, I really did think it was somebody else too. And then I was like, this dude, boy, that dude is a character, man. Gotta love him. Gotta love him. But yeah, I think it was a good show. I turned up the heat a little bit on you, and you didn't turn off the camera and lead the show, so it was all good.
No, I think
So
you really did a much better job than I did. I think that my approach was based on the past, which I wasn't aware had changed, but I'm glad about that. Right? I'm happy to be wrong in those situations. I really truly am, and I'm glad. I thank God for what He's done in your life, and I pray for Him to do more and for Him to help you. Open your eyes, awareness to Him more and more until you come to where that old lady wants you to be. and then you can be with her one day.
Yeah, I try to, like just from the standpoint of just having an understanding of at least how things or intent to be. I try to be open minded, and then like just like the stuff I was describing to you, I'm not gonna hesitate to say that I don't think it's by accident, or as my uncle pastor would say, by osmosis, as he loved to say. So, but yeah, stuff like that always kind of take me aback a little bit, and then I come home, and it used to be I would tell my wife, and we would kind of talk about it, and things of that nature. But now it's a little different talking to her about it, because it's I don't want to give her the wrong impression, and so, but I end up telling her about it anyway, and she get the wrong impression, and I just got to deal with it. So, shout out to future pastor Trey Williams, but yeah, I mean, I try to be more open minded. A friend of mine said we can't stay stagnant. Stagnation is death. Even water, if it stagnate, it become bad for you. So I'm like, I can deal with that. So, but yeah, I think you did good, except not answering that one question. But
Yeah,
yeah,
that I believe was a malformed question. Or
no.
Yeah,
I'm gonna explain.
No, I take that back. I don't think it was a malformed question, but I think that I gave the appropriate answer, and I don't think that. Yeah,
I respect that you said that God wouldn't ask you to do it, and again, you dealing from the standpoint of reality. That's why I said hypothetically, let's just say God did, and so, but it's the question is difficult on purpose, and so I get it, and I think you answered it as best as it could be answered, still staying in line with what you believe. Because I would have been like, nah, I'm not doing it. But I think in order to stay in line with what you believe, then that I don't know another way to answer it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Damone Jr. would have came up with something creative, but but
yeah. Now from hypothetical.
And look, I got Najiti saying, if God asked me to sacrifice my kids, I'm doing it. And Leandre says, no, that's not the best answer. The answer is yes.
Well, that's his opinion. He's entitled to it. That's his opinion. He's entitled to it.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Trey, as always, says what? But so, and Trey, I see you in there. If God, hypothetically speaking, not saying that God would do this, just saying hypothetically he did, would God, if God asked you to sacrifice your children, would you do it? It's, just, again, not saying that he would ask you to do it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying hypothetically, if he did, would you? Just something to think about. And yes, I'm asking on the GT put yes 3 times. That is amazing. That's amazing. Robert, I'm not gonna lie to you. I like your answer a lot better than theirs. I really do. So, and listen, Byron, I found one that I like better than yours. Byron said, I reject the premise post-resurrection, but I kind of think y'all saying the same thing.
Pretty much. So, no, I'm not saying. Yeah. I would say that. Yeah, that's about. Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, I think that's true. Byron and I are probably saying the same thing.
Yeah, Byron just fancier than you. That's all.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna let you close out and tell the people about your channel one more time, and anything else you want to mention. And I'm gonna be interviewing Robert as part. I'm doing this thing, and I just decided to call it Make fun of me all you want to. I don't care. Challenge me on it if you want to. I don't care. My wife says that's the beautiful thing about me. And yes, Leandre, I have beautiful qualities. So I'm doing something that I'm calling the Black Church, a House of Liberation, and I'm interviewing my friends who are in the Black Church. So anybody that want to volunteer, step up, and I'm gonna interview my brother Robert Ash next week. We just gonna talk about some things regarding our people coming out of it during slavery and coming out of it, and how the Black church played a pivotal part in that process. But go ahead and tell the people about your channel and everything else you got going on, my friend.
Okay. Thank you. And again, it's the Thinker's Bible on YouTube, and really, it's geared toward helping people understand that the Bible can be believed by people who are thinkers, and that also it's not the Bible is not beholden to any one political platform or party or any one Christian denomination. That the Bible itself is beyond that, and takes the good and rejects the bad out of every single portion of it. So please do, visit, come by. If there's topics that you'd like me to do, to discuss or do, talks about, let me know. Be happy to put those on the schedule. God bless you and thanks. I'm also now on TikTok. It turns out, at the Thinker's Bible. Did that about 3 days ago. Had about got a few hundred followers and there if you're interested. But that's more short stuff. But the Thinker's Bible is more the more in-depth, studies that we'll be doing.
Okay.
Thinker's Bible on YouTube. Okay.
And I'm gonna try to. Oh, okay. So never mind. I thought that was the link to TikTok, but it just took me back to your channel. I was gonna try to put that in there too, but yeah, find them on TikTok, and y'all hit that link and subscribe to the brother channel. Like I said, he got good info. I like the way you edit the video, so I thought that was nice, and so I definitely like the channel. So yeah, y'all check the brother out and support. Good brother, very insightful and very much explains it in a way that anybody can understand it. So y'all check him out, the Thinker's Bible. So. And then y'all know me. Just come on back next week for that interview. I got something coming up with Cap, or Africans really are people. Y'all know how me and Cap do. So y'all come back and check us out. And I'm gonna put the poll up again so Cap can see how bad I beat him up. Because no matter how, it be 100% to 0%, and Cap gonna say he beat me up. So whatever the case may be, I'm gonna give y'all a chance to vote on who got the better of the dialogue between me and my bro. And no matter how bad I beat him up, he gonna be saying he won. He like a wrestling heel who always gonna say they won, no matter how bad Stone Cold Steve Austin beat him down. So I'm gonna do my Stone Cold Steve Austin routine with my goatee and my bald head, and I'm gonna stun Captain K all night long, like I do in all our other conversations. And that's the bottom line, because D.M.G says so. And with that being said, y'all come back and check us out. Paradigm Shift TV 314. D.M.G TV 314 will be debuting in about 2 weeks. First interview going to be with my, as I call him, my uncle pastor, Steve Simpson, and his wife, First Lady Isella Simpson. And we're just going to be talking about marriage, relationships, what the trials and tribulations, ups and downs. I'm sure they're gonna get into the spiritual aspect of how that thing stayed intact. After that, I'm gonna interview my queen, and then I got some other people lined up. Got some powerful comedic brothers and sisters that's gonna be coming on to talk about why that spiritual perspective was better for them. And walking away from Christianity or Islam, whatever they physical persuasion was before that, and why that path has helped them evolve into into a better person. Because that's the thing. For me, I think that it's important to respect where all Black people coming from. You may not agree to follow that particular tradition, but if it's helping that person move forward in a positive direction, then I'm not here to knock it. So I definitely got some of my Kemetic brothers and sisters coming on. Of course, I'm gonna have some Hebrews in an interview setting where I'm not debating with them, and just talk about how that perspective help them move forward. Of course, I'm gonna be talking about mental health and how I deal with bipolar too, but I'm gonna have other people on to talk about it. My favorite therapist, Dr. I call her Dr. Christina, but she's clear in that she's not a doctor, she's a therapist. Have her on for an interview and let her come in and interview people and things of that nature. So, we got Vic Damone Jr. himself, aka Leandre, interviewing some philosophy professors and religious studies professors coming up. So look out for that. And then I'm trying to see if we're gonna finally have that Nobody and Black Line Supreme debate on, is Christianity part and parcel of the white supremacy, and is the Black church an extension of the European church? We got some possible scheduling conflicts with February, but I wanted to have it in February for Black History Month. But because of certain obligations, we may not be able to do it. So once I get that figured out, I'll let y'all know. But other than that, we definitely trying to bring some more content on a more consistent basis. So I'm gonna be doing something on Black existentialism next month as well. So peace to the queens, Sakina, Uncle Maat, and that's it for now, family. Shout out to Robert Ash for coming in and hanging with me for 2.5 hours. And for those who stuck with us through the whole show, we appreciate it. And we'll be back at it again. Paradigm Shift TV 314. That's peace.